Welcome to What Your Pastor Really Thinks, where we talk about faith, theology, and culture. And today's a fun one, guys. We're talking about pop culture and the church. With us, we got Pastor Matt Wolf of Rise Church, Denver. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great today.
Pastor Ryan McBride, Catalyst Church, Canyon City.
Hey, guys. Glad to be back once again.
Pastor Drew Tarwater's out on assignment. He may jump in here as we get things moving on this one, but out on assignment currently. And that assignment is G14 classified, in case you guys are wondering. Can't tell you about it. So, but we're talking about pop culture in the church. And so I'll just throw this out to you. We'll throw this out to Matt to start here. And the question I have is, I've gone to a lot of churches in my life. I was born on Saturday and church on Sunday, and I've traveled around a lot. And I like going to different churches. What do you think when you walk into a church and there is a cover song playing to start the sermon or start the service? Sorry.
Yeah, no, this is a real popular way of reaching people in the community. And there's a huge church, one of the biggest churches here in Colorado, does this like every Sunday. It's real popular, and it comes in like this stream that's often called like the seeker-sensitive model of church, which is basically like, hey, we want to reach seekers, and people are out there interested, but let's get some kind of hook that they know already, so that when they show up to church, they have something they know. It's like, I've heard that song before. Yeah, that's Sweet Caroline. Okay, I can come into this. And so I think if you're going to do whatever you can short of sin to reach people for Christ, like all power to you. So I would say that on the flip side, sometimes the songs you're kind of like, what the heck is going on? And, it should be like, my opinion is you should make it clear, like this is an opener to get everybody's attention and get people excited. And now we're starting the worship set. I was once at a church that did a song in the worship set that was a secular song. And I was scratching my head. I'm like, I don't want to sing these words because I'm not singing that to Jesus. And that was a big no-no. And even with those openers, even if you're like, hey, it's the opening song, or some churches do it as the closing song, and it's like to get attention or whatever. My worship pastor now, Sam, who's incredible, was at a church that did this every single week. And a couple times he got asked to do songs, and I can't remember the exact song. I want to say it was like Bad by Michael Jackson or something. But he was looking at these lyrics. He's like, I don't feel comfortable singing these lyrics, let alone singing them in church. And so we got to be careful, like which songs we're actually picking for that segment. And so I would just say, like, be careful with it. At the same time, I have used some music like that for different things. I did a whole series called I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For on the book of Ecclesiastes. And for 11 weeks, every week was named after a different classic rock song. And we'd play a clip of that song to start the message. So I have used it, and it's kind of like a thought-provoking thing, get people engaged, using pop culture to reach where people are at and then bring them closer to Jesus.
Ryan, in reaching people where they're at, do you guys use that cover song just to get people like getting to their seats and quieted down and get their cup of coffee and get ready to go?
We have, we tend to use, pop culture songs, popular music, secular music, strategically. We wouldn't do it probably like Flatirons does it, where it's every week. Not that, I mean, culture is contextualization is important, right? And that's their culture, and that's what they've created, and I think that's fine. We wouldn't probably do that every week. We would do it strategically in a series, maybe even a one-off thing if there was, the theme aligned really well. It's funny, Matt mentioned, going to, there's one place where they're playing a secular song in the middle of the worship set. We'd never do that. But to be fair, sometimes these days it's hard to interpret between the Jesus is my boyfriend songs and some of the, I mean, let's be honest, some of the songs that they write for church now, it's like,
Isn't there a whole South Park episode about that?
This could be sung to Jesus, or this could be sung to my girlfriend. Like you just don't know. And so it's confusing these days. We have to have good judgment and discernment, but that's fine.
How do you guys do that with the worship songs? You guys are more like the teaching pastors, but like, I'm sure as you guys are planning and going through what's going to happen on Sunday, you guys have some input of the songs that are being, played. How do you guys plan that out and go through like, hey, is this a good song or a bad song that we should be having in worship, or how do you guys figure that out?
I'm curious, Matt, to hear what you, because I don't think you're as involved in worship where you're at. I know you do music, you've done music and stuff like that, but I am also the MD at Catalyst at our church, so the music director. So I don't always lead, but I'm typically playing either drums or guitar, sometimes keys, and so I am like still kind of doing like band directing. My whole ministry career up until we planted Catalyst Church was as a worship pastor, and so that was one of those things I was wrestling with God when he was calling us to plant. It's like, I love doing music. And God kind of just told me, hey, I'm not asking you to give something up, but I want to add something to you. So it was a blessing. So I still get to be involved in music pretty intimately at Catalyst Church. But Matt, for you, as a lead pastor, pretty much exclusively, do you play from time to time, or have you just kind of passed all of it off? And how much influence do you have on what Sam does and what your creative team decides to do?
I actually am a musician, so I'm probably not the best one to talk to that's like the pure teaching lead pastor. My dad was the worship leader when I was growing up, and at the age of 11, he brought me on stage. So I was playing drums in church from age 11 on. My first like real gig was as a worship leader. That's how I met my wife. We were playing worship together. And so when I was in Nebraska for 5 years as a pastor, I led worship like every week and preached almost like what Ryan does. He does it with 2 services, and I don't know how you do it, because once I moved to Denver and switched to 2 services, like I couldn't do it. I was able to play drums a couple weeks ago for the first time in like 2 years, which is like a super rare thing for me. But all that being said is I have a strong background.
Like, hey, Matt, you were offbeat. Like, how's that like go in the Monday morning meeting? It's like, hey, we got to go to the film here, Matt. You were offbeat. We're going to put you on the JV squad here for a while.
Exactly. Like I have to come at a whole nother level. Like if I show up one time, people are like, what the heck's going on? Who is this guy? So I have to play well. And it stinks when I only play every other year. So, but what I'm saying is like, I do have an extensive knowledge of music and understand it, which helps. So I still have some say in songs. I try to empower Sam to pick songs whenever possible. But a lot of times I'm like, hey, can we change this? Can we tweak this? I do always say to all my staff, like I have veto power as the lead pastor. So for whatever reason, I might just say, hey, we got to cut that song. And it might be musical, or because I don't like the words, or more like that's actually extremely rare. Extremely rare. I don't know if I've ever done it with Sam. But more like, hey, we got baptism and communion this week, plus we want to show this video. It's like, we need to cut a song. So I am involved, but because I have that veto power, it reminds everybody, like, we need to make sure everything's biblical, everything's theologically sound. Sam actually writes a lot of songs internally. So both myself and my associate pastor Sawyer, we like review the songs, like are all the lyrics like theologically accurate, biblically sound? Do we need to make a tweak here or there? Because it is really important. I know we're getting way off track now, Ryan, with your question. Yeah. Can I throw one back to you? Sure. And this goes beyond music, because I know that you not only use secular music, but you use a lot of secular movie clips. There's the real popular series At the Movies. I don't know who started it, Church of the Highlands or Life Church, but it's very popular, that basically the whole message is wrapped around a movie. Mm-hmm. And I just want to know your take on it, because I've never done that. So I want to know why you do that. Are you being heretical, Ryan?
Yes, I am. I will, to be fair, let me lead by answering your question and say that I have twice now over the course of 9 years preached a sermon on Die Hard. So I'll just drop that and you can let that simmer.
Yippee-ki-yay!
Must have been a Christmas series.
It was a Christmas series. Yeah, absolutely. Because Die Hard is a Christmas movie. And so we have only once ever done like just at the movies, like in the summer. We like the rhythm of basically every other year we do Christmas at the movies, and we find new movies to do Christmas movie. We really like that. Our people love that. During Christmas time, of course, we theme it up, and it's, you walk into a theater and there's stanchions and popcorn and candy, and we still have candy left over from our last one, but people love it. It is there's a lot of people who don't people, there's pastors who don't like it. There's churches that wouldn't do something like that. They wouldn't mix that, and that's okay. They're not us. They're not Catalyst Church, and that's just kind of the culture that we've built. It's always very gospel centric. We always bring it back around and make sure that it's like, I'm telling you, Die Hard is potentially one of the most gospel soaked messages I've ever preached. There's things, and of course you have fun with it, and there's certain clips you have to do a lot of bleeping, and but man, we love it. We love doing at the movies. Different people do it differently also. Like we will show a 2 to 3 minute long clip, and then live from the stage I'll come back up, and then I'll kind of unpack what we just saw, and I'll tie it into a spiritual message. Just like Jesus used parables, I kind of see it the same way. That movies and modern entertainment in a lot of ways it's stories. Jesus used stories, and I believe if Jesus had the medium of the art, movies and arts on television, he probably would have used that to talk to his people and reach his people. So we kind of approach it like that. But yeah, we love doing it. And again, I know not everybody does, and that's okay.
Drew, we've been talking about pop culture. Drew is back from assignment. It's G14 classified, as far as you're aware.
That's right.
But just wanted to bring in, like, how do you balance the tension of, embracing pop culture to sort of, let people feel welcome, that you're not a weirdo to some level, I guess, at church, that but also like understand it's not for everybody.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it really is important, contextualizing how we engage with our community, because believe me, you guys know this, everybody that comes into church who maybe they didn't grow up in the church or not super connected with the church, man, they have every entertainment at their fingertips that they could imagine. I mean, they can, man, we can watch videos from all over the world, man. We can watch concerts from the greatest venues and Netflix, and we can watch all episodes of Severance in one day if we want. We don't have to wait till next Thursday for our show to come out. I mean, so people have such a pop culture all around them. So I think we definitely need to use it as a tool. So I use pop culture in my sermons all the time. I mean, I want to give a little bit of everything, a little bit of something for everybody, right? On a Sunday morning. So I'm making pop culture references. I'm making historical references. We're talking scripture, and we're diving into psychology and all those things, because, I don't know how many people I'd talk to who are like, well, I was at home watching an Instagram video on anxiety or depression, or I was watching this interview with this psychologist. And so people are being inundated with information. How do we as a church filter it for people? So we have to talk about pop culture, and we have to talk about what's going on in our culture too. And so I try to bring it in probably more than, say, Ryan does with movie clips, and more than some churches do with secular songs, rock songs and those kind of things. I try to do it more through the sermons, but yet, really we want to embrace the fact that people need to hear Jesus preached through everything in their life. And so one of the main ways to do that is really kind of address what's going on in our culture, for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the things in pop culture I think probably gets, talked about more on pulpits than they think is probably like sports. How many times is there a sports reference used when that's really a cultural reference?
Right.
So
Yeah.
when you're thinking about that, Matt, in your church, how do you balance that with also then, this is like just therapy for me, guys, asking pastors, if you're just like, what's going on here in this, what your pastor really thinks podcast, I'm not the pastor, and I get to ask pastors my questions. So good luck, fellas. And so how do you then, using when you're planning your sermon, like what Drew was saying with culture and everything, but you have someone who's been sitting in the pews maybe 50 years and someone who just walked in the first day. How do you balance that with what you're preaching and teaching?
Yeah, no, and that's, I think, really the question with this. I don't think I've taught a message on Die Hard because, there's some people that would be like, oh my gosh, there's F words in that movie. And you referenced a rated R movie. A pastor I greatly respect and I love. He was like a mentor of mine. He wouldn't let anyone on his staff ever reference a rated R movie. And I was like, what about the Passion of the Christ? But he just was like, that's the line, nothing. So and I unfortunately have, Passion of the Christ and Braveheart always gets for some reason, like that one gets a pass. But I haven't ever done an at the movies like Brian has. And one of the reasons is because whenever I've used a movie clip, and I've used movie clips, TV clips, not only are there copyright issues, and now it gets really tough if you're live streaming and YouTube and everything, but on top of that, I always feel like it takes too long. It's like 2-3 minutes to set up, and then I got to explain it sometimes ahead of time, explain it afterwards. And so I'm always like, do I really want to take that much time? I only have 35 minutes in it for my message. We only have people for 65 minutes or 70 minutes on a Sunday. Do I really want to take that much time to set up something? Whereas sometimes I can summarize it a little bit quicker and make just as much of a point, or just have an image behind me, or sometimes even a video clip behind me that I talk over, but we don't have to stop and listen to it or whatever. So I try to think strategically, wisely. And I used a sermon illustration from Forrest Gump not too long ago, and it was super powerful in the room. And then I went back and cut it afterwards, and we set it up as a reel on Instagram and TikTok, and it has over 1 million views, meaning it really spoke to people's heart. And so I would say I do that, even though I'm not doing at the movies. So that's why I ain't throwing stones. I think we all reference pop culture to a certain extent. Sure. But when I put that up online, and every time I've referenced something in my message that's pop culture, there's somebody, and I always think they're the fundamentalists or the baby Christians. There's somebody that's that's from Satan. That's an evil movie. And, there's comments online. And I remember one of my first messages here in Denver, I referenced Led Zeppelin. And I got this long handwritten note on the bulletin. That's when we still had bulletins about how Led Zeppelin was satanic music and how dare you reference it. And actually at the time, it was my second week on the job here. I asked my office administrator, I was like, could you take that and can you frame it? That's my first negative comment I've gotten here. And I'll take that, because here's a thing. Jesus referenced, the world around him. Paul quoted some atheistic or paganistic philosophers. He had direct quotes from them. So I think that's how they preached back then. Why can't I preach like Jesus? Why can't I preach like Paul? If he's using that to reach people's hearts with the gospel of Christ.
Yeah.
Right.
What's interesting too, and one of the objections that I will hear sometimes from Christians or from other people, other pastors sometimes, is you're going to keep them with what you win them with. And I don't necessarily think that's always true. Our people aren't coming back because they expect more Die Hard, or because they expect popcorn and candy the next week. Right? They're coming back, man, because
next week Jesus, the town.
That's right. They're coming back because Jesus is changing their life. That's why people are coming back. Amen. And so while I understand what they're saying, you keep them with what you win them with. If you're giving away a big screen TV every week to get people to come in, you're going to always have to give away a big screen. That's whatever. But I don't know that that's always true. Question for you guys. So years ago, there was a show with a bunch of different pastors. It was called The Elephant Room, and there was several different, very prominent, very popular pastors all around a room, and and they would debate because they all had different angles and different thoughts. And one of the questions, so I'm just curious with you guys, since we're on this topic, one of the questions that was asked of the pastor on there at the time, whose church did an Easter opener. They did Highway to Hell as their Easter opener, and it was, to be fair, the pastor who did this, I think it was Perry Noble at the time, New Spring, but he tied it in, and he talked about the people that came to Jesus not through the song, but through that particular message and their leveraging of that. So here's the question: Would you guys, not could your bands do it, because that's a whole different topic, but would you, if your bands could do it, if your bands could pull it off? Is that something that you would do if it fit and you felt like, man, this really just connects with where I'm going? Is that something you would do?
Yeah, I think our band could do it vocally. Man, Brian Johnson, he's just so good. I don't know that we could get there. Yeah, here's the challenge I have is there is so many people on both sides of the argument, and I understand that we want to try to help everybody see from the lens of Jesus. And so if we're going to create a stumbling block because of a song, I'm not going to do it, And so I think that's probably one, if you want to play maybe something from Dave Matthews or something that's a little more mellow, right? Like that's not so in your face. That's one thing on Easter, but coming in Highway to Hell, I do think that would create a stumbling block for some and would probably get in the way for some. Paul talks a lot about that in Romans and in 1 Corinthians, just about like we have the liberty to do it, but it doesn't mean we should do it, and because we want to help point people to Jesus. So I'd say, as sweet as the guitar solo is on that song, probably wouldn't be able to do it.
You're from the Midwest, aren't you?
I don't know if I would quite have the same worries that Drew does. I don't think I would do it, but it's for a different reason, because it takes a lot of time. And like I said, we only got 65 minutes in a service, and I want to lead people into worship, prepare their hearts to receive a message, and then respond to God, what he's saying to us. And I'm like, man, I don't have enough time to do that as is. We try to get things down to the minute, down to the second. So I'm like, do I want to give a whole 4 or 5 minutes to that song? So I might not because of that. However, I actually have sung lines from the chorus from that song in a message. So I'll just like break out into song every once in a while. So I've done that with Highway to Hell. Whenever I talk about Paul on the road to Damascus, I say, blinded by the light, so I've done it. Yeah, I'm not getting any Grammys. Don't worry about that. And even one of my messages last year, it was on praying, and we should pray even for the small things in our life. And I was like, I want you guys to remember the point of this message. So I want you to sing with me. All the small things, God cares, God sees. And I tweaked a Bleak 182 song, and people still come up to me and recite that. And they're like, yeah, I prayed for my keys and I found them. Thanks for teaching me about that. So like, I'm going to use that kind of stuff. For me, it's more like time. Like, I don't care if it's a stumbling block to you, you'll find another church to go to. Like, I'm not too worried for it.
So going along with all like the pop culture and church and how you guys bring people in, and how it could, it's a great hook to bring people in to help them be more related. But then how do you go from it feels like if you're bringing people in that way, you're bringing in consumers. Then how do you take that transition from consumer to disciple? So in your church, like, how does that, Drew, how do you guys how do you keep a church it's not a community center, it's a church. You're building disciples. You're not bringing consumers that go like, oh, I don't like what Drew said this week, so I'm going to go to Matt's church. Yeah. Oh, Matt said something, I'm going to Ryan's church. Oh, I don't like what Ryan said, I'm going to listen to Rob's little podcast.
It's a real issue in our culture. Yeah. People are looking for, again, like I mentioned earlier, man. I mean, you can find whatever you want on YouTube right now or Spotify. And so, people can listen. You can
also find what your pastor really thinks on YouTube, right. Spotify, and Apple.
And you could subscribe right now.
Absolutely.
No, the reality is, like, if you want to listen to the best preachers of all time, the most entertaining preachers, you can find them on YouTube. It's real. The difference is a community of people that's your family, And so I always we talk about this in our First Steps class. When you come to Forefront, we say, look, we want to take you from a consumer to a contributor, and that means you're actually in relationship with people, that you're doing something, you've taken a next step into a relationship with people, and you're not just sitting on the sidelines watching. But at some level, whether you're serving or you're in a group or you're showing up to a study or whatever, you're doing relationships with people. And I think that's where you start to see the fruits of the Spirit being reproduced in the lives of people, because they are in a relationship with other believers, sitting under the teaching of Jesus, and they're learning what it looks like to follow Jesus. And that's where discipleship starts, and you can learn a lot by sitting under a great teacher, a great preacher, someone who's funny. It's great. But man, something happens when you start to actually do something with what you hear. Yeah. And I think that's where discipleship takes off.
Yeah. It's not uncommon in our world, in our culture anymore, for people to just, they've gone, it's the revolving door. They've tried all the different churches, in their vicinity, their community or whatever. And they don't like all of them for some reason. There was a typo on the third slide in the second song or whatever. So now I'm just not going to church. And so now going to church for some people is, I'll just wake up and I'll brew a cup of coffee and sit on my couch, and I'll hop on, someone's live stream from out east, a celebrity pastor, or I'll just not go. I'm like, that's not church. Like, to be clear, there is no context for the gospel outside of the community of believers. And so it gets really challenging for me, because we see this again all the time. I hear this all the time, and I think a little bit of it is our language, right? We hear so much of my personal relationship with Jesus, and that's fine, that's good. But even more than that, I see biblical grounds for it. No, this is a shared relationship with Jesus. That together in community, we have a shared relationship and responsibility to lean into the body of Christ and others for the spurring on, like Hebrews 10 talks about. We're spurring one another on to love and good deeds. Who you're spurring on if you're sitting alone on the couch? And so I think these are all great topics. But man, it's heartbreaking to me the way that the culture is going, of people disconnecting from church and doing church on the couch.
Yeah.
How do you help people go from consumer to disciple?
Yeah, I was going to say that, Ryan, since we're talking about this pop culture, tell a story about your guitarist.
Oh,
Moving
gosh.
from consumer to contributor.
Yeah, it's a great one.
I'll share this. And I don't think, by the way, that he would have a problem with me sharing this story at all. My good buddy, Aaron. So I actually play in a cover band, which that's a different topic for a different day, outside of church world. And we play at festivals and breweries and all over the place.
All Michael W. Smith songs, I'm sure.
All Michael W. and Twyla Paris and Sandy Peck. And Carmen, of course, Carmen.
Yeah.
Petra.
Only good church kids who grew up in the church even know what I'm talking about right now. So when we started playing together, it was supposed to be just like a one-off show. I'll kind of share the long-ish version, shortish. I'll make it as quick as possible. And my buddy who was playing at church at the time, he's like, "Hey, my uncle's going to come play guitar for us," and he's like really good. I was like, "Okay, great." And so he shows up, and his name is Aaron, and we start running through songs that we're going to play for this one-off gig. And this dude is like insane. Like, this caliber of guitar player shouldn't live in Fremont County, Colorado, right? Like that type of, like, crazy. And so like after that rehearsal, I go up to my buddy, his nephew, and I was like, "Man, we got to get your uncle to come play in church. Like, he's insane good." And he laughed at me, and he's like, "Buddy, that will never happen." He's like, "You don't understand. Like, he's a historian. I mean, there are historical documents in this world that he's like one of maybe like 10 people who's ever been able to hold and have his eyes on. He's studied history, and he's studied psychology and all of these things. And he's specifically studied all of the worst parts of Christian history. And of course, the Crusades and all this stuff, but just seeing that throughout the course of history. And he's a staunch atheist. He hates Christians. He makes fun of them. It's that will never happen. And I was like, "Oh, you're just like putting a challenge flag down in the ground." Like, don't say that. So anyway, long story short, man, like just playing in a band, just being real with Aaron, developing a relationship. Well, eventually, what happened, and by the way, I didn't do this specifically for Aaron. It just worked out. God just worked it perfectly, and it just made sense. But we did a sermon series called Twisted Scripture, where we looked at different particular Bible verses that people often quote, cherry pick, twist it to mean something maybe it doesn't mean. And it was a 5-week long series, and we kind of did a play on the Twisted Sister logo for Twisted Scripture. And so we said, "Hey, let's have fun with that and leverage that." And for the last 4 minutes of the countdown timer of the service, let's do we'll start with the Twisted Sister song, but then each week of the series, we'll do an 80s hair band song, and we'll find them that kind of reinforce the theme of that particular message. And so we did that. Well, so 3 of the 4 guys in that band, myself included, already attended and played at Catalyst, the bass player and the guitar, one of the guitar players. The last one was Aaron. And I was like, "Do you think, Aaron?" So I sat down, I was like, "Hey, listen, I know that you don't, the whole Jesus thing, God thing, I know you don't get it. That's not your thing. I understand, but I'm doing this series." And I explained it to him. I said, "Would you be willing to come? Because I would love for this band, not the church band, which basically the church band anyway. I would love for us to do these 80s hair band songs, not as a part of worship on the front end of the message, but I would love for us to do that. And really, you're the guy who could pull that off. Do you think you'd do that? And I think maybe with some hesitation, he agreed. And so he came for those 5 weeks, and he would get up and he would do the song with us on the front end. And then he would walk off and another guitar player would come up or whatever for the worship set. Or I would pop on guitar and another drummer would come, something like that. And he came and he did that for those 5 weeks. And that was in probably 2018. And Aaron has never left Catalyst Church.
Praise God, man. So good.
It's such a good story. We just continue to have conversations. And of course, a lot of hard conversations, but a couple years later, I got to baptize him here in the Arkansas River, and now, Aaron, man, like he plays guitar on rotation on our worship team. Aaron leads a small group. Aaron is considering, even because he's a very academic guy, he's considering at this point even maybe going back and pursuing an MDiv. He's got degrees. He's got more degrees in Fahrenheit, but he's thinking about maybe doing an MDiv program. And so just such a beautiful example of how God can use anything to change a heart. So
no, absolutely.
That's so good. Yeah. God is good. God can use Twisted Sister to bring people to Jesus.
That's the moral of the story.
Don't discount the Holy Spirit. That's for sure.
Something about Aaron that I learned later on. So Aaron actually sat in with Leonard Skinner for a short time. He was playing in Sturgis years ago, 10 shows a day with his band, and Leonard Skinner was there, and they heard his band playing, and they approached him and said, "Hey, we're always looking for other guitar players on a rotation to travel with us and play." So he goes up to his band. He's like, "Guys, I'm out. I'm gonna go play with Skinner." I was like, "Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't?"
I know, seriously.
So, yeah, it's crazy. So
no, that's awesome. Hey, as we wrap this up, how do you keep the balance of pop culture and then also the focus on Jesus, Matt? As you guys are, you use the pop culture references, it brings people in, but then how do you balance that with then pointing back to Jesus?
I mean, point back to Jesus. And I would say, we have different philosophies and we try to do things wisely. But I mean, my basic premise is let's do anything short of sin to reach people with the gospel. And so sin is that line. And I would also say there might be some fair warning. Be wise. If something might lead you into sin, be careful with it. Like, don't just go watch every rated R movie now and, rot your brain away. Like, let's be strategic on how we do those things. Don't be like, oh, maybe I should check out the strip club because I got to know how people are living now. Like, there's some wisdom to it too. But let's make sin the line, and let's just make sure that the purpose is the gospel, not to be cool, not so that people will like me, but so that I can reach more people for Christ.
Yep.
Absolutely. Drew, as we wrap this up, pop culture, Christianity, and Jesus, how do you keep the balance?
Yeah, I think the reality is Jesus doesn't expect people who follow him to be boring, crusty, not having any fun, so worried about every little thing, bringing the devil around. I mean, I think Jesus wants us to be aware of all those things, but Jesus wants us to enjoy this life he's called us to live. And he wants us to be able to enjoy the things that are in our culture too, comedy and music and movies, and, take it with a grain of salt, like Matt said, be careful what you're putting in, right? If you eat nothing but donuts, what are you going to look like? A donut, right? So be careful what you put in and what you listen to, what you see. But in general, go watch a fun movie. Go listen to a great comedy show like Nate Bargatze, who's not gonna, he's clean comedian and that kind of stuff. Like, laugh, have fun. I guarantee you, Jesus was a riot. The disciples were probably always rolling with Jesus. And so have fun, enjoy the culture around us. Just try to stay away from the stuff that's going to steal your heart from Jesus.
Ryan, as we wrap up the pop culture and Jesus and the church, when are you guys going to play Taylor Swift? I'm the problem. It's me. So
this Sunday, right?
Not this Sunday. That was over with the football season, Drew. We won't go there.
Go Chiefs.
How many Chiefs references have you made in the last couple of weeks? I'm sorry. I don't want to pick.
He's turned away so many Bronco fans from his church.
Hey, I'm still waiting for Sex, Drugs, and Donuts. Is that the name of the series? We're gonna
Coming.
drum that up. Yeah,
It's coming. Yep.
yeah. We talked about that in a previous episode. Anyway, yep. I think again, yeah. Just make sure that we're intentional, that we're wise and discerning, and that in everything we do, it's meant as a means to point people to Jesus ultimately. So
Absolutely. If you're thinking about Jesus and you have questions about Jesus, leave them in the comments for us. If you have a question there, if it's something you don't want in the comments, feel free to reach out to us directly. You can reach out to me and I'll send it out to the pastors. It's just Rob at simpler, sympler.com. Love to hear from you. Love to hear what questions you have. How can we help? What resources can we get you to help you with your next steps? Love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening. Like, watch, subscribe, all the social media things that help us out. Share with your friends if it's worthwhile, if you think so. Love it. Thank you guys so much. We've got some fun, exciting episodes in the hopper coming, guys.